Hello, everyone. First, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Scientific Program Committee of Raptor Research Foundation for this opportunity to present my talk virtually um, at this year's Raptor Research Foundation conference. Your support and the platform you provide for sharing research are greatly appreciated. Please excuse me for my voice. I have a strep throat, so if something is not that clear, I'm sorry for that. Today, I'm going to discuss a segment of my postdoctoral research focused on bird migration, range expansion, and zoonotic disease transmission in a rapidly warming high Arctic, observations from indigenous perspectives. Arctic tundra is an ecologically sensitive ecosystem, increasingly threatened by climate emergency. In the Arctic, birds face increasingly unpredictable impacts of climate change, along with alterations in habitats and species interactions. How climate driven changes in bird migration affect other avian species and humans' disease risk depends on an intricate web of factors. One such change is the range expansion of southern birds into the high Arctic. Birds migrating across national and intercontinental borders can act as long range vectors for any bacteria, viruses, parasites, or drug resistant organisms they carry. The increasing overlap between the marine and terrestrial habitats due to the loss of sea ice is resulting in a new assemblage of bird and mammal species. The most emerging infectious diseases, two of the most emerging infectious diseases in the Arctic are brucellosis and the disease caused by Erysipelathrix rhusiopathy. And these are the zoonotic diseases found predominantly in muskoxen and caribou. Muskoxen and caribou are the key mammalian species of the Arctic, and the diseases can infect the humans also by the contact with infectious tissues or eating the infectious meat. The presence of brucellosis and the disease caused by erysipelathrix rhiziopathy in wildlife poses a significant health risk to the Inuits and the other indigenous peoples. This is a diagram from Arctic Migratory Bird Initiative showing the different flyways, including the Circumpolar Flyway, the Central and East Asian Flyways, the African Eurasian Flyways, and the Americas Flyways, and showing the priority concerns amongst the birds along these flyways. We know that the migratory birds connect the Arctic to all other parts of the globe, and they serve as the key link between the marine and terrestrial environment and may facilitate the cross-species transmission of pathogens and also creates a way for new endemic disease hotspots to develop far from the original infection source. Muskaskin and Genomics in the community workshop, Magic Workshop. We have organized a community engagement workshop at the Canadian High Arctic Research Station in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, Canada from January 9th to 11th, 2024. And this workshop brought together diverse stakeholders and rights holders, including the Indigenous elders, the representatives from the Hunters and Trappers Committee or organizations, representative from the government institutions, from academic and government scientists from Canada, USA, and Europe, including the researchers, the wildlife biologists, and the other social scientists, members from the Muskosk Expert Network, and the Nunavut Tourism Association representatives, Macwick Corporation and other stakeholders such as outfitters and producers of Kitikmeot products. Kitikmeot is muskox wool. And this workshop facilitated the dialogue amongst all the participants and the knowledge sharing. The indigenous people, the indigenous elders discussed the impacts of climate change, including the change in vegetation types, and reiterated the presence and prevalence of ravens in the high Arctic. The zoonotic diseases are increasing in the high Arctic, and ravens could be the source of pathogen transmission. It could also affect the populations of other birds of prey like the snowy owls, peregrine falcons, tree falcons, rough-legged hawk, and the other key mammalian species of the Arctic like the muskox and the caribou. And there were open discussion sessions, the panel discussion sessions amongst the participants, and the indigenous elders shared their concerns and changes in the ecosystem they are observing, including the changes in the vegetation types, the changes in the species behavior, and presence of ravens, cranes, and other um, southern species to the north. Problems or challenges. One problem for bird species that traditionally nest in the Arctic is that other species that normally nest further south are now moving northwards, and it could become the competitor for the same nesting site for the same feeding sites. And the new species migrating to the Arctic could also import new diseases and parasites that would threaten many indigenous species. The decline in country food affects not just the physical health, but also the cultural integrity, economic stability, and the overall community well being among the Arctic indigenous peoples. The terrestrial and aquatic animals are the traditional diet of indigenous communities. The prevalence of diseases poses an increasing risk to their health. Indigenous views on the zoonotic diseases in the Arctic emphasized a deep connection to the land, animals, and the traditional knowledge, and they shared their concerns towards zoonotic diseases as the indicators of ecological imbalance. For them, the country food is not just important in terms of their nutritional significance, but also because it is inextricably interwoven into their way of life. Knowledge gaps. Changes in the migration patterns due to the climate change should be monitored. The role of birds in human disease remains largely unexplored in the Arctic. The host parasite associations, the broad scale wildlife disease surveillance is needed. The lack of background information on diseases in northern birds often makes it difficult to assess whether the initial detection of a pathogen signifies true emergence, whether it should be a cause of concern, and whether it is pathogenic to a specific host. Conclusions. The shifts in breeding or migration phenology could alter the temporal overlap of hosts and pathogens and increase the potential for contact between the host. Gaining a deeper insight, deeper understanding into the bird migration patterns and their infectious diseases could aid in predicting the future outbreaks of infections caused by emerging zoonotic pathogens. We are focused on community-driven research and education to enhance the understanding of these diseases while respecting the cultural beliefs and practices. And it could be effective in informing conservation priorities and decision making for global biodiversity conservation and the co-management and the indigenous food security. recommendations. We should learn to see with both the eyes, follow the two-eyed seeing concept, that is from the indigenous lens and from the Western lens. And we should embrace each other ways of knowing by integrating the traditional ecological knowledge with the community-based monitoring to monitor the health and disease and expand the scope and effectiveness of emerging technologies like the DNA-based methods and the genomic technologies and other advanced technologies for the conservation and the co-management of Arctic biodiversity and wildlife, thinking about the indigenous food security references. Acknowledgements. I'm thankful to all, and this is a in the center of the slide is the QR code of our project's website, and you can scan this and learn more about the work we are doing for the co-management of Arctic wildlife and biodiversity. Thanks, everyone, and special thanks to the elders of Kitikmeot Heritage Society for sharing their thoughts, for sharing their knowledge, and giving their consent to present this work at the Raptor Research Foundation conference this year. And also, I would say special thanks to Rebecca McCabe and Mary Sophie for giving me some extra time to record my presentation because of this throat infection. I lost my voice for a few days. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.